So we hear over and over again that we all have Buddha potential. Some of us even say that to others, that we all have Buddha potential. But I think to really understand that, we have to have a pretty good understanding of the nature of reality, to really understand that, to really have some conviction. So that might be a little, kind of seem a little far away. But what we can work with today, for sure, is this notion of courage. And so all of us have courage. And it takes courage to be a monastic. But if we think in our life, all of the things that we have learned, to open ourselves to something new, to not give up, to continue until we mastered something, and we all have that ability and all have that experience, that takes courage. And so we can tap into that. We do tap into that as we're training and learning something new. And of course, the wonderful thing about that is as we continue to practice, as long as we don't give up, then we experience the conviction in ourselves and the really the fruits of our endeavor. We can really rest in the mastery that we have gained in many different ways in our life, from as simple as in kindergarten, learning how to tie our shoe. Of course, nowadays we use Velcro, so maybe that's a lost art, but but anyhow, you get my point here, that many, many, many things we have learned in our life that maybe we had great doubts about. But by just continuing and bringing forth some courage, then we see what our potential is, what we can accomplish. And so as we listen to the teachings and listen to really everybody speak, we can kind of keep in mind that much of our movement in life, much of our mastery over different things really hinges on some courage and some belief in ourselves, belief in our potential. And if we could keep connected to that, seeing ourselves clearly in that way, then there really is nothing that we cannot accomplish in this life, including Buddhahood. And so let's open to all the possibilities that are brought forth and consider them deeply and really work to see ourselves very clearly. And of course, we do this not only for our own benefit, but we do this for the benefit of all beings. So today I thought to talk a little bit about working with expectations. It was interesting how Venerable Choni's talk at lunch fit right into this topic. Because really when we think about it, our identities are what feeds our expectations. If I think of myself as a certain something, whatever that identity is, then comes with that these expectations, these ways of thinking about myself and ways then of behaving. So I looked up the definition of expectation to see what our trusty dictionary said, and it says, seeking to prevent disappointment by establishing in advance what can be realistically achieved. So that's interesting, isn't it? So of course, what is our difficulty? It's that we create unrealistic expectations all the time. And I don't know about you, but it's very rare when I see that clearly. I don't even know that I have created these expectations until I'm smacked in my face with the disappointment or the afflicted reaction. And of course, because we are under the control of afflictions and karma, we are going to continue to create unrealistic expectations for a long time to come on this path. And so it's helpful, I think, to accept that fact. A lot of what we do in this practice is accept where we are. And most of our difficulties come from our self-centered attitude that is pulling us away from that knowing. And of course, these unrealistic expectations we will be creating no matter what clothing we wear, no matter what the style of our hair or having no hair. So this is going to be part of what we're going to be dealing with for, like I say, many, many moons to come. And unrealistic expectations arise in relationship to many different things, but I thought to talk a little bit about 3 ways that I've noticed, at least in my own mind. So unrealistic expectations arise in relation to our perfectionistic minds. I don't know if you have perfectionistic traits. Maybe I'm the only one. I kind of doubt that, though. This is Buddhism, and people that are interested in Buddhism kind of have that. What do we call it? The high achiever. Yeah, we have a high achiever club here. And then the second one where unrealistic expectations come up are in relationship to authority or our teacher relationship. And then the third way that unrealistic expectations arise is in relationship to what our idea of what training is. What does that mean? What is our training here? So I think those 3 ways, we have a lot of unrealistic expectations. And of course, the bottom line here is what fuels all this? It's our self-centered attitude. And so all of these unrealistic expectations, if they arise, it's through the filter of self-centered attitude. Now the good news is our self-centered attitude is not us. So it is not the core of who we are. It's something laid over like the cloud cover that blocks the sun. And so we can turn it, we can move it, we can transform it. But if we're really working through that lens then, and we have these unrealistic expectations, then our reaction to the disappointment we experience is also through this self-centered attitude. So our reactions are pretty messy also, usually. I think the first thing that was very helpful to learn in living in community is that it was so clear to me after a while how deeply conditioned I was to look for my happiness outside of myself. That kept coming up over and over and over again. And the way that I knew it kept coming up was because my unhappiness always was referenced to something outside of myself. It's because of you or you or you or you. And as I lived in this community over the weeks, especially at first, you know, everybody was on that list. I would be happy if you wouldn't do that. I would be happy if you wouldn't do that, you know. So it was started to get very clear to me after I went through the entire community. It's like, okay, wait a minute. Can all of these people be creating this? No, of course not. So it's my own mind. It's my self-centeredness. And to accept that takes some flexibility, takes some ability to be humble. And now we're bumping up against our identities again. And of course, you know, when we live outside, not in a community like this, and I bump up against somebody that does something that I don't care for, what do? I move away from them. I get out of their periphery. I distract myself with something else. I don't engage with them. Very easy to just bounce from this to that to this to that so that I can keep myself in some state of feeling okay. I was very good at that. I don't know how good you are at that, but I was very good at that. But you know, it did not bring anything for me. Because no matter what I did and where I went and how I configured my life, I still had this pretty big aching hole in the middle of my chest that was quite empty. No matter what I amassed, no matter what I did, as long as the reference was something outside of myself. So the beauty of community is that we stay put and we are intimately connected to people that do things in such a different way. And we have two choices. We can make ourselves miserable, or we can make ourselves happy. And it rests here, it belongs here, and it's up to me here. And on my own, I cannot do that. I tried many years. I could not do that. But here, with a teacher and the Buddha's teachings, slowly, slowly, we can do this. It's also very good to recognize and accept that Buddhist practice is hard. So if we have an expectation that once we get into a particular environment, it's going to be easier. Don't let your self-centered attitude talk you into that one, because it's not true. Buddhist practice is hard. So then why would we do it if it's so hard? Because if we don't give up and we keep on with it, we start getting contentment and joy. That's why. We start seeing and experiencing our potential. We start understanding that we actually have the ability to do anything with our mind. And that's freedom. That's freedom. And it really doesn't matter how far along we go in this life before we die. If we start getting that awareness, that's enough. And that keeps us going. And then we can practice in the next life, in the next You know how many it takes, doesn't matter. When I think about the quality of my contentment and joy now compared to before I met Buddhism, there is absolutely no comparison whatsoever. That doesn't mean that what's going on right now for me is simple or, I'm just, skating through. No, it's hard work. But it's the kind of hard work that in not so long of a time, I can see the results of it, even in this life. So it's very valuable in that way. And of course, why is the Buddhist practice hard? Because we're working on our negative habits. We all have anger. We all have attachment. We all have jealousy, pride. We all have all of these. Is there anyone here that doesn't have any of those I mentioned? You see, we're all in the same boat, every one of us. Just like the Buddha had them. No difference. And then the other part of what we practice is not only do we have to work on decreasing these negative habits, but also we have to start building up constructive habits. They don't just fall out of the sky. We have to actually build them, kind of like Venerable Neiman's beautiful BBC the other day when she was talking about smiling and what that does to our neurochemistry and how that actually changes our brain, lays down new tracks. That's the kind of work that we have to do to fill up the space after we let go of some of the negative actions. We start filling the space up in here, with these positive methods. So it's kind of, two-sided what we're working with. So it's hard work, but and it takes time. So we have to figure out how we can continue to do this over time. Because when you first hear about it, it sounds a little dismal, doesn't it? It's like, geez, I don't know. It sounds like, I don't know, this sounds kind of hard. But the one ingredient that many of us are lacking so that we can do this over the long haul is some compassion for ourselves. We have this idea that if we are hard on ourselves and we don't give up and we strive, that we're going to, make this happen. But when we approach ourselves that way, we are actually blocking ourselves from progress. You cannot beat yourself into Buddhahood. We have to love ourselves into it. We have to bring our heart into it. And I think many of us, certainly it was the case for me, I had a lot of self-critical negative talk in my mind that I didn't even know was there. It took a while for my mind to calm down enough that I could actually listen to what was going on because it was so habitual. So we have to kind of give ourselves some time to settle into this kind of practice. It's not like anything we've ever done. It's not like school. What is school? We read, we memorize, we take a text, and we put it right back out, and that's the end of it. And then we forget it, usually. This is not that process at all. This is such a different process. And so because it is such a different, complex process, and we are pushing against these habits that have been with us for many lifetimes, we have to approach this with some kind of, what would I call that? like some kind of positive rocket fuel, which is compassion, you know? That's what keeps us going forward. It is compassion. And so the other difficulty is that everybody's mind is so different. We all think so differently. We all have such different identities, such different reactions to things, such different habits. So there isn't one thing that's going to work for all of us. We have to have this curiosity mind and this mind that's going to look at this like a laboratory. So I'm going to try this and see what works. So when I wake up and I don't even know why, but I'm in a foul mood, how can I work with my mind to turn that? Because I know for sure if I don't, I am going to have a miserable day. And that isn't helpful to me or anyone around me. So we have to start figuring out how this works. And when we first start looking at it, for sure, it is not so pretty. It's kind of messy. That's where compassion comes in again. I'm in the same boat as everyone else here. I am no different. I have some really messy, icky things in there, and I have some really wonderful things in there, just like all of you do. But if we don't look at both sides, it's going to be really hard and it's going to get really tight. We are conditioned to look at what isn't working well and what our lack is. We're conditioned to look for the problems. Why? Because, you know, when we were roaming this earth and there were animals that looked at us as lunch, we had to look at the things that were going to be problems. So we are conditioned to look at the things that are not working well, just without even thinking. That's where our mind goes. We have to train our minds to look at the things that are going well, to look at the things that are positive, to look at the things that are safe, that are kind, that are compassionate. We have to consciously construct that in our minds. And as we start to do that, our unrealistic expectations start dismantling because we are seeing ourselves more realistically. Because none of us are just that one-sided, conglomeration of mess that doesn't do things right. We have also this whole other rich, beautiful side of all of the positive, virtuous qualities right inside of each one of us. But if I don't look at them and I don't acknowledge them, I'm not going to feel very balanced. Every time that I've made some progress in my practice, it is because I have come back to this powerful idea of compassion for myself. Because think about it, how can I have compassion for someone else if I don't know how to do it and relate to myself in that same way? That's impossible. That's impossible. And yet we keep asking, gosh, why was I so hard to that person? Why was I said something that hurt them, or I did something that hurt them, or I ignored them, or I didn't even think about them. Why? What's the matter with me? What's the matter with me? Those kinds of actions are really tied to how I relate to myself. And in this society, too, we think that if we start being compassionate to ourselves, we're going to be lazy butts and self-indulgent and not do anything. Don't we think that? Or is I'm the only one that has that? Yeah? Isn't that something that kind of resonates, I better not, if I let go, oh my God, then what? Well, where does that come from? So Alex Berzin talks about this a little bit. He says, often we have inappropriate attitudes toward the Buddhist teachings due to our backgrounds, whether religious or not. And this is even reflected in the translation terms with which we learn the Buddhist concepts: virtue, non-virtue, merit, sin, good and evil. These often bring in the whole concept of guilt, prevalent in many Western religions, making us think that we're bad if we're not practicing. When you miss a meditation session or you don't practice, you maybe say the words, but you're kind of not really there, that kind of thing. Do you feel guilty? Do you feel bad? Yeah. Well, it comes from absorbing these religious ideals in this society. Yeah. Creates a huge problem in our practice. He goes on to say these kinds of ideas come from religions that are based on laws given by a higher authority, with ethics based on obedience. If you obey, you get rewarded, and if you don't, you get punished. So it's really good to start looking at how many times we get into that paradigm and we beat ourselves up with that kind of notion. I'm not good, I didn't do it right, I feel guilty, I'm bad. Because in Buddhism, that is not the case. Yeah? When we act destructively, it's not because we're bad people and should feel guilty. Instead, it's because we have this basic confusion. We don't realize that acting in certain ways will bring untold problems to ourselves. So the response to someone who does something awful is not, you're guilty and you're going to hell. Our response is compassion. So we have to internalize that first. We have to bring that inside our own heart. I think it takes a long time to start capturing what our internal dialogue is. How many people feel like they have a really good handle on that internal dialogue that goes on in the mind? You feel like you have a really clear about how that is, these automatic thoughts that are kind of in the background, kind of playing like music. That's what it sounds like to me, And then when I listen to it, it's like, oh, you stupid idiot. Why'd you do that? It's like, wait. Yeah, so let's see. Let me get an example. Okay. I had one today. Well, actually, I had it started yesterday. I learned that I would be doing this yesterday, and I thought, oh my God. And then I thought, okay. And then I started, working on it, preparing, and then I wasn't feeling so good, and my energy was draining, and that's always a good sign to me that I've got the negative music playing in the background, because it takes tons of energy. So I settled myself and started listening a little bit, and I started hearing, you're not prepared to do this, you can't do this, it's not going to go well, you don't know enough, all those things, all these things that aren't realistic. They're self-centered. It's all about me and how terrible I am. That's really its tune. So, The refrain. That's the refrain. Yeah. Yeah, you say that here and we'll start making a song about it. Yeah. So then I just started countering that. I usually put my hand on my heart here, and I just say, okay, first is acceptance. Okay, you're having all of these really negative thoughts about yourself, dear. I don't know, how is that going to help you? How do you feel when you're just thinking about this right now? It's quite painful. Why would it be painful? Is it painful because it's true? No, it's painful because it's not true. It's painful because it's not true. So, can you set that down now? What could you say instead? Well, I could say, like really, most of the time, since I love the Dharma, I want to share a little bit of what I know, and if it helps somebody, I can be very happy about that. And I'm going to do the very best I can with the information I have. And honey, that's good enough. Because if that's not good enough, we're in deep doo-doo. Because isn't that all we can do? That's all we can do. So of course that's enough. And so when I talk to myself that way, I feel my heart opening. Does everybody know what it feels like when your heart opens? Yeah. So sometimes I'm so shut down I can't access it. It's like So one way I can get my heart open is just to use my imagination. So for me, I just close my eyes and I think about all of a sudden coming into this room, running, tails wagging, 13 baby puppies. Here they come, jumping all over me. Oh, look they are so happy. Oh, they're licking, they're jumping up on my lap. So I have that image. I cannot not smile. Now maybe you hate dogs. So maybe it's fish for you, I don't know. Or birds or something, I don't know. But, whatever it is, or, your baby niece or nephew, or I don't know, whatever it is. But something that touches your heart. I'm still feeling the results of just that image in my mind. My heart is open right now. I can feel that. So if you practice that quite a lot, you will feel what that feels like. And there's just this subtle opening that happens. When that happens, I feel not separate, I feel close to everybody here. So I'm getting closer to reality, what reality actually is. Because we all are very close to one another. I would cry. Yeah. Yeah. Bye-bye, I'm going to go cry. Yeah. That's assuming that exactly what is this moment will stay permanently this moment just like that. And that is not reality. So what you just said sounded to me like whatever the health condition is, it is permanent, it will never change, it is exactly as it is now and will be forever. And that is not reality. Many things can change from that. We all have a health condition. It's called birth, and then aging, and then sickness, and then death. So, we have different varieties, we all have. So again, what is the first thing always? Acceptance. Acceptance. And some of acceptance is grieving what we wanted and what is. So that's part of what we do. We accept. Yeah. But whatever it is that we're experiencing changes. I mean, sometimes with the things in my body, that it's like, painful, I can't move much, and da-da-da, and my mind goes on. And so I notice that, and of course my pain is worse when I do that. And so then I say, okay, you have to make it feel this way exactly as it is this moment until tomorrow at 8 o'clock. That's impossible. And just saying that reminds me of how ridiculous that is, because things change all the time. So when I have something with my body and I name it something and I solidify it and that's what it is and it's never going to change, the pain increases and I'm in misery. So instead, I open my heart, and maybe first I have to cry a little bit, but then the crying will stop because you can't cry forever. Go and cry for 3 days, please. Impossible. Impossible. And yeah, you'd fall asleep. It would be impossible. So, cry a little bit, then what? Then you open yourself to start watching without judgment, but with acceptance, how it changes. Because it does. I don't have extreme pain in my knees every moment. Or my thumb, or whatever it is. I have a list. So, so we start working with accepting what is, and accepting it in a realistic manner, which is it's going to change. It changes over time. And then we start confronting this thing about, if I accept it, then I can tolerate anything. That is my experience. If I don't accept it, there isn't so much of anything I can tolerate. But, I can say that, but until you start working with that is when you will understand that. That's when you'll have some understanding of that. Most of us have that problem. So first we look at what is the result of giving tremendous amounts of compassion to others. What happens? Yeah. So you can't sustain it. Yeah. So what that tells us is that we need to turn around and start working here. I don't know. I think so much of our practice for the first, I would say 15 to 20 years is primarily here. Then, when we do interact with others in that time period, what we are doing is quite beneficial. But when we have the idea of helping you, and it's either a distraction from our own stuff or we're looking for the goodies because we're out there going to help and then we'll get the accolades or the positive or whatever, that doesn't fly, that doesn't work. We can't sustain that. So I think really so much of our practice is here. And we are so conditioned. I have to learn this over and over again pretty much every day. Because my knee-jerk thing is looking for happiness outward and not paying attention inward. And that doesn't work. Never has and it never will. So it starts becoming, how can we be a wise best friend to ourselves? And we have some information about that because we have helped other people and we have seen that it has been beneficial. So we know how to do it. So we have to figure out a method where we can start turning that around and start working with ourselves with those same kinds of methods. And what do we get at first? Pushback. Huge. Then the negative stuff really starts flying. You're selfish. You don't deserve to pay that much attention to yourself. You're going to become a lazy slob, blah, 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 whatever it is. Yeah. And so then you have to work with that. So there's these layers upon layers that come. Why? Because we have such habit energy. And whatever we throw at that habit energy, the self-centered attitude, throws a fit. Why? Because when we start practicing what the Buddha taught, self-centered attitude is dying. It's losing its job. It isn't like that. So we start kind of working to understand the difference between self-centered attitude and me. And so when my peace of mind is disturbed, I will ask the question, what and why? And 9 times out of 10, it's because of self-centered attitude. When I can identify that, then I can accept what's going on and then start applying antidotes. Antidotes are different based on the day and the state of mind. So we need kind of a big toolbox, and we keep pulling out different things. Sometimes I'll try something and it doesn't work. So then I don't just give up. I try something else. Maybe that doesn't work. Try something else. Over the years, though, you start getting to know your mind well enough that it's easy to understand what you need to apply after some time. It doesn't take much to figure out what it is, which again is the beauty of this path, At first we have, it's like the loom of the rug, a tapestry. At first we have all these little strings of information, and it's not all so connected. But over time, as we keep working with things, it starts getting connected, and we can see how one thing affects another and how this has to do with that. And pretty soon we have this basis that we kind of rest in, that we don't go to such extremes anymore, like totally freaked out or totally, despondent, or, but we react to what happens in a more balanced manner, not so unrealistic, And so we have to have some patience for that to be built. The fastest place that can be built, as best I know, is in a community in a monastery. The hardest and longest for that to be built is out in the world. That's my personal experience. Both are painful. Aren't they? Both are painful.
Sure outcome of one is questionable.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, wherever I go, I got my afflictions. They're coming with me. And of course, we can hear these words, but until we experience it internally to know what it feels like when I am creating my own pity party and what that feels like, versus when I am offering myself self-empathy. Again, we're back to the laboratory. We have to pay attention to when I have a certain state of mind, what result does that give? And again, that's the beauty of living in community, because there's enough space here that if, especially at first, my habitual reactions I am left with. Because when you're in a place of unskillful reaction here, people give you all the space you need. No one is, on you. And then you get to experience that misery. That's very helpful. That's very helpful.
Learn not to stop fixing each other.
Yes, that's very helpful. Because then that is the motivation to turn it. I can remember when I finally when I would get angry, I would shut down and become ice queen cold, and no one would want to come 50 feet around me, I was just like ice. And I did that yet again, some years back, and a very kind member of the community, after a few hours, came and asked if she could help me with anything, with such compassion. Thank you, Venerable Tarpa. And it was so kind, and it just, right then, it was like the contrast between that kindness and what my mind was doing was so huge. It was like, no more. No more. I'm done with that now. It is too painful. Too painful. No more. And I have never gone to that degree of that kind of reaction since then. So, if we can pay attention and identify and accept ourselves with some compassion, we can turn anything that we have going on internally. And there is something, that poem and what you're saying, there is something that is honoring. We have to honor ourselves. We are worthy. We are worthy. So we have to figure out, how can we honor ourselves? What does that mean to you? How would you do that? You have to figure that out. The way I honor myself might not work for you, but you can figure out how honoring yourself will work for you. And then what's the result of that? You become happier. Then what is the result of that? Those around you become happier. I don't know, we can't go wrong. That's win-win. That's win-win. And of course, it's full of starts and stops. Again, we have to remind ourselves, these habitual patterns and the self-centered attitude are very embedded. So I'll get, feel like something kind of, I've moved it now, oh goody. And self-centered attitude is back there planning the next attack. And it'll look very different and feel very different, but it's still self-centered attitude. And so I don't get discouraged with that. I just, because the longer you do this, the more tools you have, and the less it wears you down. And through this process, you understand the value of balance, like Venerable Tarpa was talking about. If we have some balance, we can do anything. And so it's up to me to check how much energy I'm expending in my body and in my chatter, in my verbal. Because either can run you dry. And so it's kind of like, I know that there is only so much time, and I don't know how much time there is. So I know if I just let my mind go off and chatter, 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 then that is where my energy goes that day. That's kind of a lost day. If I run around, or, nervous energy, or any of these negative mind states, it's kind of like, the thing that I say most in my mind, think most of my mind, oh, honey, drop it. Honey, drop it. So it's got compassion, and it's got some clarity. Drop it. It's not going to serve. There is no win here. It doesn't matter if I'm right or wrong. That isn't what's important. There's no competition. And then, of course, you practice that for some time, and then you get some space in your mind. Then you can consciously choose to move your mind in a certain way, and now you're going to help. Now you have resource, and you're going to help. And it's going to be nice help. It's going to be help that's going to mean something. Valuable help. So I guess my takeaway today would be that we all have the potential right inside of us, but it takes a while for us to have some conviction in that. And so we tap into seeing the example of our teachers in front of us, same species, we can go on that same track probably. We know about that. So, we watch and we try to learn from them. We remind ourselves that our relationship to them is all about learning from them, and they teach us a lot. We don't compare. It's helpful not to criticize. For the first 6 months I was here, most of what I said every day was, there are no enemies here. Most days I did not believe that, but 1% of my mind was able to say that. That kept me here. And that's the beauty of the mind. All I need is just a corner of the mind to say something like that, and it takes hold, and then it becomes my reality. Why? Because it is reality. There are no enemies here. That was what I was experiencing, but that was my crazy mind. So that's the beauty of the Buddha's teachings. All we have to do is put in a little phrase or something in there that has some virtue to it, that has some clarity to it. And that will make the difference. That will make the difference. And like what we do every day here, we say the 3 motivations in the morning. After a while, it can become rote, and it just flies off the mouth, and, you're thinking about how you're going to make for lunch or whatever, that thing. So we have to keep waking ourselves up again and again and again. Everything is structured here so that we can keep connected to our good qualities, to our kind heart. But we have to keep waking ourselves up again and again and again and again. And so when I'm doing, those things and I'm gone bye-bye, I ask myself kindly to do it again. Now do it with heart, honey. That's what I say inside. I say, honey, now do that with heart. And I say it again. On the bad days, sometimes that's my practice. But that's a good practice. So we have everything we need right inside. We just have to uncover it, bring it forward.